earlier today, we got some pretty notable news around Fallout 76. I say it's notable because it's just going to have a pretty big impact on the game in its own right, but also if you actually take it together with certain data mined or suspected announcements at E3, it paints a pretty clear picture as to what we're going to get or what genre of update we're going to get. And what this is based around is a combat overhaul, or as Bethesda dubs it, combat improvements to Fallout 76. Naturally, right now in Fallout 76, although combat can be enticing and interesting, it really isn't. Very rarely do you see a genuine PvP focus, and even further, those PvP engagements tend to be extremely one-sided and quick, at least in my experience. But with rumors of an up-and-coming PvP mode coming to the game, whether it be Battle Royale, TDM, or Free-for-All, it does make looking at these combat changes a lot more interesting, and potentially a lot more substantial as to the impact they'll actually have on the game. So first and foremost, let's actually look at some of the changes, and then we'll discuss how it could fit in with what else we know. So the first interesting thing they do mention is that this is going to be a part of patch 10 that's coming to Fallout 76 this June. We don't know much about patch 10. There's a few other minor changes along the way, but as I've been speculating for quite a while, I think we're going to see a quick turnaround between whatever Bethesda reveals around Nuclear Winter, the next DLC for Fallout 76 at this E3, and when we actually get to play it. I think it might be like, oh hey, you could play it this Tuesday or this Monday. One of the first notable ones is Bethesda's actually adding an option to show damage numbers. You've definitely seen this in other games. Cyberpunk's getting it, and now Fallout 76 will have it, and it's pretty standard. But one of the big aspects of this is, especially if you're using automatic weapons, it allows you a lot easier to see when you're hitting critical areas, such as the head, or something like an upper chest, as that will deal more damage than some of the other areas, like a leg, arm, or something irrelevant. They mention how in adventure and survival modes, this will be able to be toggled on, but will start as off by default, so everything will look the same the next time you play the game following the patch. Although the next thing we do see is animation canceling. This is a pretty common thing we see in many video games, especially first-person shooters, and this one does have a before and after. Right now in Fallout 76, while you take out one of your weapons or start putting it away, you have to wait for the entire animation to finish. But following this change, as soon as you actually pull the trigger, the animation will cancel regardless of where it is, and you will fire a shot immediately. Really useful if you were using this in a PvP mode, such as the survival mode, or maybe even something else we're getting. They also are adding the same animation canceling to sprinting. In Fallout 76 right now, it's a bit jarring the way weapon firing and sprinting works. If you fire a weapon, there's a short delay before you could actually start sprinting again. Like take this clip where I just try and sprint as soon as I'm possibly able to, and you can see there's a little gap there. Well, they're removing that. Now you can just sprint immediately, but even further, you'll actually be able to sprint to cancel reload animations. The way it exists in game right now, if you're reloading, you're just stuck. You have to finish the animation and then start sprinting, which leads to a lot of clunkiness. This will definitely tighten it up. But even outside of that, there are a couple of other changes. Now additional weapons are getting crosshairs or reticules, specifically while aiming down sights with these weapons. You'll now have something on screen to actually gauge where you're pointing at, where in-game right now it's actually just blank with these particular weapons. I'm pretty happy to see the paddle ball getting some love. I've been a long-time supporter of this one. But also speaking of aiming, we're seeing a decrease in the amount of time it actually takes to aim down sights. They provide an example of a before and after comparing weapon scopes. It's fairly hard to actually tell from this footage, but actually putting it into a timeline and looking at the timing differences, reducing the time it takes to aim down sights for scopes by 4 times. It previously took 1 second, now it takes 15 milliseconds. They're also applying this to pistol iron sights, although it seems like literally just pistol iron sights, at least based off the wording, so the difference for a pistol should look something like this. And they're also bringing some changes to VATs that are going to be widely appreciated. So right now in VATs, if you actually take multiple shots on a target, it'll just kind of linger there after you finish them off. There's no real reason why, it just almost seems like a bug of some kind, because if you one-shot a target, that won't happen, it'll immediately exit, but they're changing it in the future, so as soon as you finish off any target, whether it's one shot or taking several shots, it will immediately exit VATs. And then finally, we are getting several additional options in the form of customization. You'll be able to invert your x-axis if you want to, and splitting up sensitivity adjustments to both your vertical and your horizontal as 2 separate settings, and that's going to apply to both controllers and keyboard and mouse. So all of this actually sounds quite substantial. At first glance, looking at some of these changes, it might not seem super huge to you, but if you actually play Fallout 76, you have to realize these are actions, even if they're minor, that you do hundreds and realistically thousands of times over your play session. How many times do you use VATs? How many times do you reload and then start sprinting? I think once this update ships, it's going to make the combat, whether it be PvP or PvE, just feel a lot quicker, a lot snappier, and hopefully a lot more fluid. All around, I would say these are pretty positive changes. I don't see anything that's really a negative or even remotely a negative. The only thing I could see people potentially not liking is actually seeing how much damage you do. But again, that is a toggleable option, although if you're not using it, you are to some degree at a disadvantage compared to enemies in PvP. But even outside of the natural benefits it brings to the game in its current form, this also seems to be quite clear a primer update for a later, larger DLC, that with Nuclear Winter, and specifically the Nuclear Winter game mode. I've been talking quite extensively about this on the channel, and there's been a lot of indications that that's going to be a PvP focused game mode. Pretty much since release in Fallout 76, there have been load screens mentioning a TDM mode and how that will work. There's certain cells you could find in the files that are actually named a PvP playground or otherwise PvP focused. There's certain game modes that have been referenced, such as a TDM, a free-for-all, or even something known as Workshop Assault. Through data mining, we know there's a quick play screen. This will allow you from the main menu of Fallout 76 to invite a few people to your squad so you could join a server seemingly containing one of these new game modes, or alternatively, it should have an automatic matchmaking capability. Some of the scripts associated with quick play do describe things such as getting the number of players on a team or getting the score of a given team. And then finally, the most recent are some of those voice files that do suggest we are getting at least one or potentially several new PvP based game modes. They describe being the last man standing,
you were victorious in the last test, will you survive yet again?
Wiping out the enemy team,
only one side will return to the vault. Statistically, you are evenly matched.
Wiping out the enemy squad, or even just wiping out individual enemies.
Excellent work, candidates. Your elimination of the other teams was quite efficient.
And there are certain other voice files that do push me towards a battle royale mode. You hear about a closing firestorm and how you have to get out of the way of it.
Candidate, you are outside of the storm's safe area. Candidate, this area will be engulfed in flames soon. Prepare to move to safety.
A survival of the fittest is described numerous times.
A battle to the death is the only sure way to judge the superior candidate.
And there's a couple around provided weaponry.
Analysis. Provided weaponry was effective in producing results, but in a longer time frame than expected.
And really the icing on the cake for me was, before any of these voice files were actually released, RC did a leak around Fallout 76 saying it was getting a Battle Royale mode, a leak that I think is pretty credible and has already correctly predicted things. So taking that all together with these new combat improvements that will be particularly valuable in a PvP context, it certainly seems like this is something we're getting and probably getting pretty soon. As I mentioned earlier in this video, we know the patch 10 with these new changes is going to be shipping by the end of June. That could also mean we get this new game mode also by the end of June. I could certainly see Bethesda doing a larger combat update to Fallout 76, being extremely PvP focused. Although, based off some of the leaks I've heard and even just some other data mined information, it's my understanding that to some degree, some of the stuff from this new PvP mode will carry over to the traditional adventure mode. Naturally, I would take that with a grain of salt because it's a leak, but at the very least, we 100% know that there are voice files in Fallout 76 for a quest around Vault 51. Vault 51 and what's happening inside is also seemingly the cornerstone of this new PvP mode. Specifically, the Vault experiment seems to be PvP focused, and I think the way it'll be implemented is Nuclear Winter is the Vault experiment, which is a new PvP mode. In some past videos, we saw how through translation errors, Bethesda was accidentally leaking minor details around this new mode. We saw that there's going to be something known as an Overseer rank in the game now. I think what that Overseer rank might be is your rank for the PvP mode, independent of just your character rank. So you can go to matchmaking and actually get paired with people that are competitive relative to your level. That again is all speculation. We don't really know a ton about how this will all fit together, but either way it is very interesting, and I think there's going to be a big combat update to Fallout 76, bring these changes, bring the PvP mode, but also potentially some regular quests for traditional players. It's definitely something to look forward to, and we should have concrete answers to this in just a few days' time. But speaking of, something else pretty interesting to pop up earlier today is Bethesda created a Discord server. I'll have a link to this down below. It's kind of entertaining. It's just a lot of like-minded people excited for E3. The server is specifically themed around Bethesda's E3 conference, but even further, something interesting is the channels we see on this Discord server. There aren't channels for just everything, but it's actually pretty specific. A general discussion channel, but then Doom Eternal, ESO, Fallout 76, The Elder Scrolls Legends, Rage 2, Wolfenstein Youngblood, and The Elder Scrolls Blades. Barring any surprise announcements that we haven't heard about yet, which I actually made a full video on earlier today, you guys should check it out, I think this is kind of a confirmation of, okay, this is what's getting stage time at E3. Some of these we already knew, like Rage 2, Doom Eternal, and Fallout 76, but some of those other games we didn't have an explicit confirmation, but I definitely view this as one. It'd be really weird for Bethesda to just have these channels and not end up talking about them, especially when other games' channels are missing, like Prey or even the Elder Scrolls in general. This could mean we finally see a full release of the Elder Scrolls Blades, as it does have a channel, considering as of right now it technically still is in early access. But either way, as always again, I thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.